The walls of Jerusalem stood tall once more, a miracle of stone and sweat, echoing the perseverance of a people who refused to vanish. The exiles had returned, the city was breathing again, and with each sunrise over the hills of Zion came the sound of new life, hammers, laughter, and sacred songs. In the midst of this rebirth was a man named Amashai, a priest of the Most High, chosen not just by lineage, but by heart. Amashai's name, meaning burden-bearer of the Lord, was a fitting mantle. He was a descendant of Immer, part of a priestly family whose hands had once served in the grand temple of Solomon. But he had grown up in the aftermath of ruins. Like many others of his generation, he had only heard stories, tales carried down through fire and exile, of gold-covered sanctuaries, of incense rising like morning mist, of a people at peace with their God. Now, the time of stories was giving way to the time of rebuilding. Nehemiah, the governor sent by Persian favor, had called for men of strength and devotion to inhabit the city once more. Jerusalem needed not just warriors and workers, but worshippers, those who would stand in the holy places and re-establish the rhythm of reverence. Amashai answered that call. He was not the high priest. His name was not the most prominent. But he was faithful. His voice carried in the courts of the newly rebuilt temple, lifting ancient prayers and offerings before the altar. His hands lit the lamps and arranged the sacred bread. Day after day, through sun and storm, he served, never for recognition, but for love. It was not an easy life. Jerusalem was still vulnerable, surrounded by enemies and haunted by memories. But Amashai stood firm. In his prayers, the sorrow of the past met the hope of the future. In his presence, the people found reassurance that though much had been lost, God had not abandoned them. He walked the same courtyards where kings once ruled, now quieter but still holy. He taught younger Levites the rituals, passed down the Psalms, and reminded them of the covenant that bound them to something greater than survival. He reminded them of worship, the kind that held a people together even in exile. His name appears only briefly in the records, Nehemiah 11 verse 13, a verse listing the priests who chose to dwell in Jerusalem. But behind that mention is a life of sacred duty. Amashai was a bridge between the shattered past and the promised future. He was one of the silent architects of spiritual restoration. When the trumpet sounded over Jerusalem's hills, calling people to prayer, Amashai stood in the inner court. His eyes lifted upward, his voice steady, he bore the burden of his name. And through him, God was worshipped once again in his holy city.